Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode here at WILDMAN Lifts. I'm your host, WILDMAN. Now on today's episode, it's a warm day because we're in the summer months now. And the sun isn't directly out. There's some overcast, so fortunately I'm not directly in the sun. But it's definitely hot enough for me to know that we're definitely in summer. Now on today's episode, I'm going to be working through a hip impingement, which is something that commonly happens to lifters when they're lifting a lot. And it's been bugging me for a while. If you've been watching some of my videos lately, it's been bugging me, and I think I need to start working on it and getting serious about it. So for today's workout, I'm going to be doing that bad boy right there, the axle deadlift, because the axle bar is harder to pull from the ground, and it's super stiff, and it's thicker in diameter. So with a barbell, you have a lot more advantage of lifting it from the ground because it bends. This does not. It's super stiff. So that's going to teach me how to pull extra hard from the ground to teach my brain how to carry over into the barbell. And in between, I'm going to be doing the circus dumbbell as well, because I need to practice the technique, but I also want to get some good mobility work in. So I'm going to be leaving that the same weight at 80 pounds the entire time as I go up in weight on the axle deadlift. But I'm also going to be doing that bad boy right there. That's going to be the tire flip, but I'm going to add a little special something to that, so you have to find out and see what that is. And in between, I'm also going to be doing, couldn't find where it was for a second, some sledgehammer strikes as well on the tire to work my obliques and also my shoulder mobility and to get some extra conditioning in. And hopefully all of these things together will be able to make it so that I'm able to do some deadlifts with that axle today, because just warming up, I can already tell that this left hip is not going to fire. So I'm going to have to really work extra hard to get it to fire in order to reach my top sets. So let's pop into today's workout. Let's see how we did. Now for today's strength giant set, this is how I'm doing the axle deadlift. I'm actually doing it in a single format, where I completely start over from the bottom and then try to power through it like it's a single rep every time. Because maintaining that tension for reps is actually a lot easier than starting from the bottom, and the whole purpose is to try to pull harder from the ground with this bar. And as I go up in weight, I'm going to be doing the circus dumbbell in between. And that's going to remain at 80 pounds, like I said earlier. It's just mainly just to get some conditioning, to practice the technique for the circus dumbbell. But it also is a great method to open up my hips and to warm my body up for the big lifts. And I'm also going to be flipping that tire, but I'm going to be doing a burpee tire flip, where I do a burpee, and instead of doing like a jump or jumping over something, I'm going to throw my shoulder into that heavy tire and I'm going to flip it. This is just a great exercise to do all around for strongman and for conditioning. And then I'll finish with some sledgehammer strikes for shoulder mobility, but it also destroys your obliques and it raises your heart rate. So this is a great exercise to do in conjunction with everything else. And that's going to be the strength giant set for the day. But even doing just this light weight with the axle deadlift, my left hip was not feeling it. Number one, I think it's impinged, and I think that it's my inner thigh and the outer side of my hip flexor that's causing me to not be able to lift as much as I want to lift today. So since I had to dial back the weight today than what I wanted to do, I'm going to have to throw in all this extra giant set format to make sure that I get a really good, decent workout by the time I'm done. But it also helps open up that hip and warm my body up, so that way that maybe I might be able to hit my top sets for the day. So we'll have to find out by the end of this. Now basically what an impingement is it usually happens in your joint. It could be in your shoulders, your elbow, your knees, and in my case, your hips. Basically your bone wants to fit into a very comfortable socket. That way it's able to rotate and to bend and to move as we're designed to do. Now what an impingement does is the bone is actually rubbing up against the tendon that's holding that bone in that socket comfortably. As a result, it starts to inflame, and then it starts to decrease your range of motion because you start to feel pain. And in the beginning, it may not hurt so bad, but then over time, if you just ignore it, sometimes it starts to get to the point where you can't even bend your knee or raise your arm because the pain is just so bad from that inflammation. So when you get an impingement in one of your joints, they're actually the same kind of remedy in order to combat this to make sure that it goes away. The first is actually what a lot of new people do when they go to the gym, is they just ignore the pain. And they go in the gym, and at first it's painful to bench press, or it's painful to deadlift or to back squat. But then as they go up in weight over time and their body starts to get warmer and blood is pumping to that area, it starts to feel a lot better. And then they're able to perform the way that they want to do it. But then the moment that adrenaline rush comes off and they're walking around at their house, then they start to feel that impingement again and that pain. And they can't even do simple tasks. And sometimes just quote unquote ignoring it actually does work, because blood gets that area, it's able to heal. You're not lifting that much heavy weight when you're a beginner, And so you're able to recover and actually get better from that. This is essentially what I'm doing today with the strength giant set format. I'm doing all these other exercises to try to wake up my hip and get blood to the area, so that way it will feel better by the time I get to my top set. But what happens when that doesn't work and you get to the point where it's chronic and you can't even do simple tasks anymore because it hurts so bad and your range of motion is decreased? Well, then the second thing that you got to do is you got to work the antagonistic portion of those muscles. For example, if you have a shoulder impingement because you're bench pressing, more than likely your front delts have gotten too strong and it's pulling your shoulder out of the socket towards your chest. This causes that bone to rub against that tendon, which then makes it so that you get that pain from the inflammation of that bone rubbing against the tendon. So then you got to work the antagonistic portion, which is your back muscle. So every bench press you do, you got to do at least twice the many reps with that much weight in the back and do like a row on the machine or on a cable machine or with free weights. Then as you make your back muscles even with your front delts, then that shoulder joint is going to sit perfectly within that socket and it's not going to rub against that tendon anymore. But even doing those two things may still not be enough, because that's what I train every single day. I make sure that I start small in weight as I work my way up. I do giant set format to try to get that blood to those areas of my body that I'm working out, so that way I'm able to perform at maximum capacity. But I'm still experiencing a hip impingement, so what the heck happened? Now in this case, that just might mean that something is weak. So with the hip impingement, your glutes or your butt might be weak, or your lower back, or your hamstrings or your quads, or your hip flexors might be weak. All of these muscles need to be even in tension, so that way your hip joint can sit perfectly within that socket and not rub up against that tendon. So if that's the case, then you want to target the specific area, because maybe it's just not strong enough and it's not able to compete with those other big muscles and it's getting pulled in all these directions. So in this case, since I know that I'm doing everything right and I still have that hip impingement, now I'm going to have to focus on that hip joint today and actually do exercises that target that one hip flexor and the muscles surrounding that socket. That way it's able to sit evenly in there, and then I'll be able to use it for high capacity training. And I'll show you guys what that looks like later in this video. Once I get to my assistants and my accessory giant sets, I'll show you what exercises that I'm going to try to do in order to target that hip flexor, because I've never really done that before. Typically my hip impingements don't usually happen to me because I usually do everything correctly. But it could just be that I'm overusing these muscles, and now I need to make sure that my hip flexors are keeping up with those big muscles now. So we'll find out and we'll see together. Alrighty, so based upon how my left hip is feeling, that actually went very well. So doing the giant strength training and working up in between with those exercises definitely got my hip activated and fired, so that I was able to do my top sets for today. And I know 410 pounds isn't the most that I could do, as you know that, but that was a lot of reps from doing it in a single deadlift format. So me doing it that much, from completely letting go of my brace and everything and starting over, I'll take that any day, especially on this bar, because this bar is extra hard to get it from the ground, like I said, because it doesn't bend. So it's very, very stiff. So now I'm going to jump into the variation giant set to finish off my day. But then after that, I'm going to do a lot of hip exercises and mobility work. And I can show you how I like to work through my hip impingements and how to cure it. So let's pop into that next. So when typically I don't get to lift as heavy weight as I want to, like today, then I get to try out something on the variation giant set to kind of make up for it, just to kind of feel like that I did something special today. So this is going to be a deadlift to a Zercher squat with the axle bar. And I'm just going to go up for a 1 rep max, but here I'm just trying to warm up. And I kept it in the same format as the strength giant set by doing the circus dumbbell, just because I kind of like to keep that on an even number at the end of my workout. And it's just a fun movement to do. If you haven't tried this, seriously try it. It's super fun to do. So I just kept it with that same burpee tire flips as well and the sledgehammer strikes, just to kind of keep everything even and to get some good conditioning in as I go up now for a 1 rep max on this deadlift to Zercher squat. And like maybe a year and a half ago, I tried to do this for 300 pounds and I was unable to do it. I tried it with both without a belt and with a belt, and I wasn't able to get 300 pounds. So for today, I kind of wanted to see if I got my hip open up to do it. And that went up super easy with no equipment on. So I felt very comfortable going up to 300 pounds, which I have to mix grip this time because I can't do overhand with the axle because it's just too thick. And this actually went up super well. I have to let out a really big He-Man grunt here, but it went up and I was super ecstatic about that. that actually made the whole workout for me. Basically, it became that I was doing those axle deadlifts to warm up for that big Zercher deadlift to Zercher squat. So I was very appreciative of that. Now for the assistance giant set, I was doing 3 rounds, and I started off with the seated bicep curls just because it's a really great method to really isolate those biceps. My biceps took a beating from all those deadlifts and from that Zercher squat. And then this is a really good hip impingement exercise to do. It really works your inner thigh, and you're also pulling a sled as well. So I basically just pulled it from the right and then attached it to my left foot, and then just moved across my bullpen like this. And this really targets that inner thigh and gets it strengthened up, which is what I was really struggling with. You can see that left inner thigh is really struggling right now. And then I did some hip raises just to kind of, again, attack that hip flexor. I rarely work my hips out because I usually get enough of a workout with all the lifts I do. But since I'm facing that impingement, I'm going to have to actually try to isolate that. So this is something that I like to do to get that hip impingement out. And for the accessory giants, I was doing 3 rounds, and I was doing stubborn curls because, again, I wanted to finish off my biceps because they were taking a beating this entire workout. And this just really finishes them off and gives it that definite shape. And then I also did some hitchhikers. I did it with a heavier band this time. Since I didn't do very much back work this time, I really wanted to make sure that I was really isolating that with those hitchhikers with the heavy band. And then I did some Nordic hamstring curls. And I love doing this because it really works out your hamstrings at the end of the workout. But I also did some burpees. So now I'm able to do some more explosive push-ups as I'm trying to isolate those hamstrings and finish off this workout with a bang. Hey, all right. A 300-pound axle deadlift to Zercher squat. I've never done that before, and I did that without a belt and any other weightlifting equipment, so that was freaking awesome. I'm very happy about that. Kind of shows that when I got that hip open finally, then I'm able to perform the way I want to perform. I was really happy to hit that. And I also did some hip impingement exercises that I've learned in physical therapy and in general from YouTube, from people who know what they're talking about. So now you got to learn how to fix the hip impingement, what exercises to do, and then you would know what to do and how to handle it. So I really hope that everybody learned something new, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.